Do you have any pet peeves? I have loads. Well, no, that's not true. I used to have loads. And you would think that they kind of point to a lack of patience in someone. But what I used to find interesting about when I had a lot of pet peeves, things that really annoyed me, was that, for instance, if I was in a room with someone that kept doing that, like kept shaking their knee anxiously, I used to try and stop them doing it. I'd be like, oh, please stop doing that. Because it used to start making me feel anxious. And I found myself quite often trying to do that in situations where there was things like that niggled me. I would try to get the other person to stop either doing the thing or behaving in a particular way. And halfway through the awakening, I began to notice that what I was actually doing was, rather than trying to address, maybe say, why someone's leg shaking caused me anxiety, or why someone's behavior made me feel uncomfortable or something like that, rather than trying to address that from the place where everything lies, and that's inside of us, I tried to control other people's behavior. Excuse the helicopter. I tried to control other people's behavior. Now, initially, I wasn't consciously aware that I wasn't addressing something and I was just trying to control somebody's behavior. I wasn't aware of that at all. I found myself just trying to do that to give myself an easier life. And I would say certain things to myself like, oh, when you do that, I get anxious with you. And I don't even know if that was necessarily true, or it was something I just used to say because I couldn't explain, because I hadn't taken the time to sit with it and to look at it and see, well, why does this make me feel like this? And some people might be thinking, oh my God, you can't overanalyze everything. Well, you know what? If you want to make a change in your life in respect of your outcomes for yourself, not for the world, because you have to do it for yourself first, regardless of what people tell you about how selfish that is. If you don't do it for yourself, if you can't be a reflection of what it is you're telling other people to be, then your words are pointless. And even to the point of when it's pointed out to you that you're not necessarily acting in the way your words are, well, then you should be able to grow from that. You have to start depersonalizing these things, or you never get past it. So what I'm actually looking at was the idea that instead of us trying to get to, well, not even trying to get to the root, that's probably too deep at this point, beginning to notice that, is there any behaviors in society, or maybe the way someone speaks, like, for instance, right, I grew up in Ireland, and it was back in the days when the Troubles, it was a war, I don't know why they gave it a name like the Troubles, but back in the day when the Troubles were in Ireland, I had, I would say subliminally, by what was going on and by early education and the people around you, being taught to dislike the Northern Irish accent. If you had asked me at the time if I didn't like it or not, I would not have well, I probably would have said I don't like it because I'd heard people say it, but not understand why I didn't like it. I was repeating words rather than having any emotional attachment to the statement. But there came a time when all the Troubles had finished and I came to the UK. And I had no problem, because I didn't really understand the Troubles and what was going on. I was a child, but I lived through it as a child, borrowing people's hatred or borrowing statements, because a child can't hate. So if you end up hating something, then you've probably been taught to do that through either action or word, or observation. But I didn't realise that it was so deep in me till I came to the UK and I heard someone speak with a Northern Ireland accent. And I had no problem with the person. I didn't know the person. But I noticed something shift inside of me. I was able to observe it, thank God. I was able to actually observe it in respect of not turning to something that had obviously been sat dormant in me that I'd been taught, and that was a form of hatred, without body. You know, what I mean by that is without having any experience behind it that you could say, well, you shouldn't hate, no, but I can see why you might, you know, if this thing happened or that thing happened. But this wasn't that. I watched it rise inside of me, and I began to look at it, and as I was looking at it, I saw it for what it was. And that was the moment I realized that I'd been taught that as a behavior. So when I started to notice sometime into the awakening that I began to observe certain actions of other people caused a reaction in me. And reactions can only ever come from us, no matter how we try to blame other people from them. Our reaction is our responsibility. There may, like, it's still yours. Even you might say, well, what if I was drunk, or what if I was ill, or what if I was like, well, it's still your responsibility. You may not be in the right mind when you've done it. It just means that you're responsible for the choices, and the choices were bad. That bad in respect of, not bad as in good or bad in respect of the outcome of your necessarily life or well-being, you know, or other people's as well, like, not to be so self-centered. But again, we have to talk about ourselves and address from within first, or we can't mirror out, or we're a dirty mirror, you know. We're at that point pointless until we clean it, you know. So anyway, as I began to notice people doing all that, and me trying to control their behavior and stop them shaking their leg rather than sitting with, well, why do I not like this? I began to do that quite a lot. It can be overwhelming in the beginning because we begin to realize how many areas of our lives we try to control, and not even control in ourselves, in other people. And when you start to watch it, it becomes quite obvious to you. And you might say, well, everything we look for becomes obvious. Yes, that is true. But if you're looking for a particular thing in your own behavior, well, that's a great thing. You know, I'm not talking about calling attention to things that you don't need in your existence. I'm talking about things that you call attention to that will benefit you in terms of growth, and maybe leaving things behind that you might want to leave behind. So I began to look deeply when it wasn't just the leg shaking. There was many areas where I was doing this, trying to control. Oh, I don't like it when you say that, or I don't like it when you look like that, or why are you always, you know, I began to observe, and it was horrible. I began to observe, and it was horrible how much of my internal programming was to control other people's behavior rather than try and find out why I felt the way I did about other people's behavior, and then therefore address it inside of me and not through control. Because there'll be points where we can control what we don't like in other people, but eventually it will just be a situation where that's not possible. Well, a lot of helicopters today. You will come to a point where there'll be situations where you can't control other people's behavior. Then what do? Then does it escalate? Do you get so annoyed by it that you do something else? Not necessarily even physically. Do you do something spiteful? You know, what goes on at that point? How much do we have to continue to control before we turn around and look at ourselves? This is not about killing yourself or beating yourself up or overtaking responsibility, which I used to do as well. I used to overtake responsibility for other people's behaviour in terms of speech as well, and other things like that. And that can be just as unhelpful. So it is about balance, but finding the balance in your own way. So maybe the next time you or the next time you find yourself in a situation where something's arising that you really wouldn't like to arise, whatever that may be, an idea, a speech, a behaviour, some form of control mechanism. And when you find yourself in that situation and your go-to is to try and get the other person to correct what they're doing, try and look at yourself, try and look inside a little bit, just take a breath for a minute. And if you can, go somewhere quiet, because it's really hard to hear the language of the body when it's been drowned out by television, music, external noises, even if you have to go and sit in your bathroom for 5 minutes. But the more you do that, the more you will be able to get to the root of why it is, one, you try to control people when they're behaving in a way you don't like, and two, where it comes from. And from that place of knowledge, you can start moving towards release. It's a go-to, and you've probably been doing it a long time, so you can't even beat yourself up for not necessarily doing it as effectively as you would like to, because there is no failure, only I'm not doing it as good as I want to. That's the only thing that we put in front of ourselves, because if there was failure, everyone would have that same estimation of what failure is, and it would be an absolute, but it's not, because failure is different to everyone. And really it doesn't exist. The real terminology should be, I'm not doing it as well as I wish. And that would express what somebody's really trying to say in terms of failure. So yeah, next time try and sit with it, go somewhere quiet and see what rises for you. And it can be really uncomfortable, so don't kid yourself. Sometimes the reasons we do the things we do go deep, and they come from a long time ago, you know. And if you're in a position where you feel open enough to do that with yourself, count yourself very blessed, because it's a scary thing to do. And when the process begins, there really isn't much turning back, because when you do it with one thing, you start to understand that one thing is everything. And then all areas of your life become a place that needs addressing on a personal level, not in a it's all my fault way. Absolutely not. That doesn't help anybody. And that's not saying, oh, you're patronizing someone by saying it's not their fault when it really is. No, this is not about fault. It's about understanding that you have the power within you to stop something that causes a reaction within inside of you, rather than trying to stop the person who's shaking their leg erratically. See you on the next one.